the, the whole point of this activity is to, first of all, engage people in exploring their world around them. And very often, you know, if you're a young scientist in training at the age of 5, you know, you're out there in the backyard collecting rocks and, you know, learning about butterflies and stuff like that. That's simply what we do when we're curious about the environment and we want to engage with it more than just passively reading about it. So one of the ways that we engage with the world as a scientist is, of course, we make measurements. And so that led to the idea, well, okay, how do you engage the most numbers of people in exploring their world in a quantitative way? And it seemed to me that one of the first things that you needed is some kind of a device that could make measurement. And ideally, it should be a device that everybody already has, but doesn't realize it. And of course, you can now see where this all leads us. It turns out smartphones come equipped with all kinds of sensors. This PowerPoint slide here shows in the far left just a few of the types of sensors that your smartphone typically has. And of course, there's an app for that. You can find a variety of apps that either aggregate all of the sensor data together into you know, one package like Physics Toolbox, which is on the far left, or you can download from your app store individual apps that turn your smartphone into a magnetometer or a sound pressure meter or whatever. All you have to do is go to your app store and put in keywords like pressure, light, acceleration, magnetism, and there'll be a whole slew of apps that you'll get to download, most of them for free. On the right, you see some sample displays that come from these apps. There are, you know, temperature measuring apps that give you a typical strip chart like reading. There are other apps that give you a digital speedometer kind of a reading, and then, you know, a variety of things in between. Many of these apps also allow you to export the data that you're taking into an Excel spreadsheet and then download it via email to your laptop and then analyze it at your leisure. So I got really excited about smartphones as data-taking mobile platforms and began the first step of trying to see just how good these things were. I mean, are they just basically toys, or do they actually make quantifiably reliable measurements of the world that you can compare to, say, professional grade meters that measure the same thing with you know, high precision and are properly calibrated? So, you know, you run through a variety of sensors, the magnetometer sensor, the light sensor, and the sound sensors, and you discover, lo and behold, that these smartphone sensors and their apps are actually pretty gosh darn good. This, I think, allows you as a teacher to consider using smartphones in the classroom for real-time data taking by your individual students. They would, for instance, take a measurement at their desks of the Earth's local magnetic field using their own smartphones. They would then record that data and then use it to, you know, pursue whatever the particular activity was in the classroom at that time. I was especially interested in how one could create a small number of projects that would be like citizen science crowdsourcing projects. So one of the first of these, one thing that I discovered was that there was a platform called Anecdata, which allows you to author your own citizen science projects as an administrator. And so consequently, on the next graph, on the next slide, you can see I've created a couple of simple projects. One is called Silent Earth, and what that one does is you download the Anecdata app from your store, you log in, and you select Silent Earth as the project that you want to contribute to. And so what this lets you do is to go out in your backyard or any place that you find yourself and make a measurement of what the local sound level is in your environment. And it turns out I've got like something like 300 people around the world that are making these measurements. And we're discovering that there are some places that are really pretty quiet, even in the Washington area, which is, you know, got traffic like you wouldn't believe. There are pockets of places where it really is pretty quiet. Another simple project that I created using the accelerometer was called the Earth Rotation Detector. And in this particular case, that's the lower right-hand world map. People are making local measurements of the acceleration of gravity with the purpose of detecting Earth's rotation. The local acceleration should be a little bit less at the equator because of centrifugal forces than it is at higher latitudes. Initial papers showed that we could actually detect this effect by crowdsourcing data from smartphones. And version 2 of this is going to involve a lot more data points. Again, the whole idea is to find ways of using smartphones to make measurements of the environment, to certify that those measurements can be calibrated and are actually accurate. And because of that accuracy, you're now able to trust the numbers and use them in a classroom or extracurricular activity, science fair project, what have you, where you are now able to use your smartphone to make measurements of your environment that are quantitative, and then that drives all kinds of conversations about statistics and data quality and higher level thinking in mathematics vis-a-vis data analysis. So that's what we're about with the mobile platforms, mobile sensor station. And if you have any questions, you can ask me about that in the question and answer period. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. I think it's really interesting, given what we're doing right now in a different world. I bet some of those numbers would be like a drop-off thing, like you'd see really interesting patterns of data just from the world changing like it is.
Well, I can tell you, I make measurements in my backyard with the Silent Earth Project, and I've actually detected the COVID-19 effect of the environment around here getting quieter because people are shut down. So, yeah.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Amanda on how you implement this in teacher education.
Thank you. So our approach to teacher education relating to STEM innovation at University of Nebraska, we have two different pieces within our department. So the first has to do with elementary teachers at the undergraduate level. Within the last year, we have decided as a teacher education program to increase our emphasis on STEM. So we had a really positive model in the past we've used where we partnered with a math department and we had what were called math blocks of courses where students would take content and methods courses at the same time along with the practicum. But what we did in the last year was to think beyond just the math piece and move science and instructional technology in with the math. So students, the same cohorts of students are taking a math content course for elementary teachers, math methods, science methods, instructional technology, and then spending 2 days a week, 2 full days a week in an elementary classroom. So they can try these things out. And a big part of that has not only been putting the classes together so the students have those coordinated experiences, but also working together and collaborating as a team of instructors across all of the classes. So to make that happen, we meet once a week as a group. And sometimes it's just a check-in. Sometimes we have more substantial work to accomplish depending on the time of the year and how things are going. But through that, we've been able to integrate across courses. So we have 3 different assignments throughout the semester. This is for everyone who becomes an elementary teacher at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln from now on. They have 3 assignments that count across classes. So first they examine their identity as a STEM learner and reflect on that. And then midway through the semester, after they've had some exposure to ideas and opportunities to reflect and think and read some literature around it, then they work together and collaborate to create integrated STEM projects, pulling together some of the content they're learning across courses. And then At the end of the semester, they do a growth project where they look back at the beginning identity project work, a journal that they keep throughout the semester on students' identities as STEM learners, and then artifacts of their work to document how they've grown, not only as a math teacher or science teacher, or the use of instructional technology, but then also with integrated STEM and being able to think about these ideas in a more coordinated and integrated fashion so that they can take advantage of the cool kind of things that we're seeing from our previous presenters, and support students in using interesting technologies and feel confident in doing those sorts of things in the future. So within this, like I said, we focused on identity and growth and integration, but we've done this with different themes. So in the fall, we started with a theme on robotics and coding, and in different courses within the block, we would integrate different types of robotics. So within the math course, for instance, we integrated B-bots for looking at different ways to connect across representations with young children. We had a day where it was just complete open exploration, which is something that a lot of our early elementary teachers are not used to. Used to a lot more structured sort of learning. So open exploration with Kubelets and with Ozobots and Edison bots. And then later on, we do a focused activity using Dash robots, where students design a path and program their Dash robot using block coding to take a tour using fractions and measurements. So there's explicit content connections. And then within their science content core or science methods course, they use microbits and code microbits to collect data around soil moisture and temperature and light and that sort of thing. So they're seeing this in different courses, so then they can put together different ideas. This past semester, right before we closed down, we were able to squeeze it right in there. You can see in the top right corner a model. We did a sustainability project focused on flooding, which is very locally relevant in the state of Nebraska in recent years. And students had to work together to design a mitigation strategy for a structure they had 3D printed and then put it on this model. And then we had a water scientist or water engineer come in and flood it and talk about different types of flooding and different types of mitigation strategies. And then they explored the science of flooding and hydrologic cycle, and then some mathematics around discharge rates and that sort of thing for rivers in the math course, and then a whole lot of technology options, VR, and like I said, the 3D printing within their technology course. So this was another example that they got to try out. And then we have engineering, where we have folks from the engineering department come in. That's what you see in the bottom, where they had 100 index cards to build a certain height and to be able to support a stuffed animal. And they had to work in teams and examine what engineering means and what it can look like. So these are some of the experiences that we're providing for our pre-service teachers, all of them, to give them a better sense of what STEM is and could look like, bringing together the different content areas in coordinated ways. The second project is on the next slide, is for in-service teachers. And this is also at the elementary level. That's where my area of focus is elementary mathematics and technology, but that's 50% of STEM. So then I just partner with folks that can contribute the science and engineering aspects a little bit more. But what we have done through this project is work with a group of 14 elementary teachers, experienced teachers throughout the state of Nebraska, to develop teacher leaders in elementary STEM within rural contexts. The map shows how geographically dispersed they are throughout our state. Most of the population is along I-80, and you can kind of see that represented in the map, but they are pretty geographically dispersed. What we've done here is we had a master's degree focused on elementary STEM, a program of study within our normal program that all of these teachers completed through Noyce funding. And they finished that, and now they're back in their communities, continuing to teach and working on proposing innovation projects where they get a small pool of funding to do something interesting and innovative around STEM in their community, which we're leaving wide open, and really excited to see where that goes because it's a very bottoms up sort of thing versus top down. so we can see what works in their communities, in their schools, and with their colleagues. So they get to kind of create their own spaces for STEM within rural schools. And what we're finding, that I find really fascinating, is the opportunity for them to innovate in ways that we're not able to see in the larger school districts and more urban areas, because they are the STEM teacher and they're given a lot of autonomy and a lot of opportunity to do really interesting things. And so it just opens up a whole world of possibilities that we're just now starting to kind of see. So we're excited to see where it goes.
Thank you, Amanda. I think it's so important that you're modeling integrated approach. I recently had a student email me on a unit plan they're working on. They said, why do we have more than one subject in here? I was like, oh, please, it's important to integrate subjects across the curriculum. So thank you for that.
Work.
Yeah.
It's really hard work. And I think it's hard to do if you haven't seen anything or experienced anything like that. So, yeah.
So I think it's important that y'all model it, what you want them to do in the classroom.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
okay, next we have Gerald Knezik is going to share with us some measurements of how we look at what changes happen in STEM.
Well, greetings everyone, and we're glad to see so many of you. It looks like about 25 online, so we're honored with that. I would encourage some of you to start typing in your questions for the presenters. Troy's contributed some, and Stan and so forth, and so we'll get to discussion in just a moment. I wanted to pick up where with one line that Amanda said that I thought was really very much the glue that holds all of this presentation together. We want to take advantage of the cool things introduced by the first presenters for pre-service and in-service teachers. And so I really do believe, and I know Rhonda does too, that what's going on at NASA right now is really cool stuff. It's very interesting to our children, our grandchildren, and it's pretty interesting to us too. So I compliment the first two presenters and the third one for being the glue that holds it all together. Rhonda and I have had the task, kind of the fun and interesting task of seeing if we could measure impact over the past 3 or 4 years now of three kinds in particular. One is gaining content knowledge for middle school students in particular that participate in these engaging hands-on activities. And on the lower left of the first slide, you'll see that we've demonstrated a quite large gain by statistical measures by effect size and content knowledge. That's good. However, as our NSF program officers used to tell us, any good teacher can promote content knowledge gain in students. We want to know if they want to spend their lives going to Mars or being a space scientist or having a STEM career. So the other two kinds of things we measure are pointed in that direction. We've been very happy with measuring dispositions, long-term attitudes that are just sensory perceptions that seem to correlate quite strongly with long-term interest in things like a STEM career. And so you'll see a semantic differential there where kids just choose on a 1 to 7 scale whether they think it's fascinating or boring or exciting or not exciting, or it means a lot or means nothing. We've also been able to show that if you send them through a round robin of 4 or 5 engaging activities that have to do with AR, VR, 3D, robotics, computational thinking, those kinds of things, that yes, you can show significant gains, and an effect size of 0.6 would be moderate for those of you who speak statistics. And so that's quite promising as well. Next slide, if we could, Rhonda. We've begun just this year with looking at retrospective pretest analysis so that you only have to gather the data once at the end. There is quite a bit of literature that shows that for things that participants have no clue about before they go into the activity, that retrospective reflection is probably just as accurate or more than if you just give them a pretest out of the blue. So something like, would I like to have a career in space science might not be very meaningful to a 6th grader if they have no clue of what space science is. So once they go through our activities, then they probably have a better idea to reflect. And I will especially commend Dr. Christensen for being the leader in all of this instrumentation. But in this area, it looks like it has great potential. In particular, the one item in this last round of February 2020 weekend camp is I'm interested in a career in space science, and there was a highly significant large gain. Rhonda, I think I have a minute or two left. Would you like to add a little to this? All right. Well, we can.
But we are looking at different how long it takes to do these things. Is it 4 hours? Is it a week? Those kind of things. The dosages are really important, I think, and we're kind of digging into that as well.
And I would like to say too, we've been really so pleased to have a part in the STEAM Innovation Lab. Basically, what happens is at Goddard, Troy and Stan and Carolyn and Lonnie and the engineers all get together and they put together things that the engineers show could work for learning. We take them down to UNT and especially through Rhonda, wrap a curriculum around them and a learning activity that would be palatable to middle school students and see if we can assess impact. And so that partnership is really working out well so far. So I'll stop for there and with that and turn it back over to Rhonda.
Okay, let me pop out of this. Well, I'm trying to figure out how to pop out of my slides. Oh, there it is. Stop share. It got hidden behind there. Okay, better. All right. So, and now there's a bunch of stuff in the thing. I thought we would have a little time for audience participation and questions. So I'm just gonna do a leading question, and I hopefully maybe Gerald or Troy can read or Amanda and Sten can read the questions and answer some. Do you already have one, Gerald, to answer? Your microphone's not on.
Yeah, no, I'll go through them. And Troy, I noticed you posted some things, so we can all go ahead. One leading question I have also is, I've noticed that in the findings we did not report, when parents bring children, that there seems to be a gender bias still, that more boys than girls come. But when we go to schools, it's exactly equal. And that's one advantage of having a whole class that comes to these space science activities, I believe. Rhonda, I wondered what you thought about that.
No, that's a good point. We also get kids who are underrepresented that their parents can't take them on a Saturday somewhere. So we're reaching, when you go into a school, sometimes you can reach out to kids who might not otherwise have that. And that's what they told us. They actually, one of the schools we worked with, they brought the kids on a Saturday. They provided buses and teachers to accompany them because these kids they probably wouldn't have been able to get their parents to take them on a Saturday to our campus. So we also like the idea that they're on our campus, on a university campus, and they're middle school kids, kind of getting the idea that maybe I'll come to college someday. And back on what you talked about, Amanda, earlier on the identity, I think it's so important, and I love that you're working with elementary teachers, because I think that a lot of elementary teachers don't have an identity that they're STEM or makers or good at math or good at science and engineering ideas. So I think if we can hit them early on and get them to feel like they are, they can do it, then they can express that to their students. Do you want to comment more on that?
Well, I want to go back to the original comment first, which was about the gender disparity in some of the situations. We had something similar with our Noyce Fellows, the elementary teachers doing this work in rural areas, where a couple of them, for their thesis project, they did local STEM nights at their school. One in a very rural town, I think there were 218 people. They had over 100 people show up for each one of these different STEM nights they did in their school. So really high participation from their community. But one of the findings she had was so many of the people who came were dads, and dads never went to those sorts of things. And they were encouraging the boys to get involved in the projects that they had, but the girls were the ones who were really engaging. And so they were seeing that with kids as young as preschool. in that sort of setting as well. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that you brought up, because we saw the same sort of thing in that completely different environment and situation too. So certainly that's persistent. In terms of the identity work with elementary teachers around STEM, we start there because we know that many of our pre-service elementary teachers are scared of math and science and technology. And so if we don't address that first, then we're just sort of banging our head against a wall the whole time. Because if they don't feel like they can be STEM learners, then it's going to be really hard for them to be STEM teachers. So I think that's a crucial first step. And we've sort of learned that the hard way along the process, is if we don't get that taken care of early on, you know, and really address it head on and work with our students in that way, then it becomes a lot more difficult to make progress.
And Rhonda, I noticed that both Stan and Troy had sort of issued invitations, and maybe we could let each of them, Stan, maybe if you could pick up on yours, and then Troy, yours about Outpost in turn, we might get some recruits in this group. So Stan, go ahead.
Okay, that would be really cool, because I've had it in the back of my mind that the whole reason I'm doing this is to provide teachers and students with another tool to, you know, take data in their classroom that they know that they took the data of, you know, so they have a personal investment in making the measurement. And using smartphones, that's the great equalizer. I mean, you know, whether you're a boy or a girl, you know, 95% of kids under, you know, 9th grade or younger have smartphones. So it seemed like basically a no-brainer, so long as we could come up with projects that made sense. And I'm thinking, you know, for the tech challenged or nervous teacher, you know, you could use the sound sensor on the smartphone and pose the question, how quiet is my classroom? And they can actually make a real-time measurement of how quiet their classroom is. And then they might even think about doing a competition amongst the different classrooms in the school. Who has the quietest classroom? Again, you're using a smartphone, the sound measuring app, and you're making an objective numerical measurement of how quiet everybody's classrooms are. And you can have a competition. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer, and my head explodes every time I think about smartphone sensors in a classroom setting, because I know that there are a whole bunch of applications in physical science and earth science that are just begging to have numerical data be used. And what better way of getting numerical data than having the kid at the desk make the data themselves? You know, so anyway, I'm looking for teachers to help me flesh out this concept, because I think it's viable.
And Stan, if you get a chance, would you mind just typing your favorite email address into the window for people who would like to contact you afterward? And Troy, if we could, I noticed I'd like to challenge you with the last comment you made. It's interesting that many of today's pre-service teachers are uncomfortable with technology. Is that still correct? And then Troy, you also mentioned Outposts earlier. So would you like to expound a little on those two?
Yeah, sure. When I was working with some of the pre-service teacher groups that have visited Goddard, I was really excited about how into their cell phones and videos and technology that they were. But then again, that's a group of teachers who were brought to a NASA center because of their interest in technology. So that's probably a very skewed audience. So when I was listening to Amanda talking about that, I found that really interesting. I had made the assumption over the past several years, with all of the introduction of new technologies and cell phones everywhere and everybody doing all this, that more and more of the pre-service teachers than before would be more comfortable with technology. Is that still true to a point, Amanda? Or?
I don't necessarily think most of our teachers are that comfortable with technology for teaching, right? So this idea of using technology yourself for your own purposes is just such a different endeavor than asking pre-service teachers to use technology to teach, let alone to teach subjects that maybe they don't feel particularly confident about in the first place. So I think there's a real big divide between using technology and then teaching with technology, especially for the STEM subjects at the elementary level.
Well, that's what's so sneaky about smartphones, because nobody thinks of smartphones as being tech, right? I mean, am I wrong on this? They're just
No.
smartphones. You know, they're embedded in our brains. And so it's so sneaky to then turn around and say, did you know that your smartphone can measure acceleration or temperature? And, you know, like I say, it's just untapped resource.
And we have one question about your the smart sensors. Are they able to be used on a Chromebook?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you can download an app that makes a measurement of a, you know, from a sensor, then you've got all you need.
Mm-hmm.
There are apps that are Android and iOS, and you know, if you can get it on your app store, then you can run with it in your classroom, either on an iPad or on a laptop or whatever. I mean, they can all be used in these ways.
Thank you. Do we have any, Troy, or do you have your next, I think?
Yeah, I think Gerald had asked me to respond a little bit more about the Outpost network, and it's interesting with, you know, the whole COVID-19 world that we're living in right now. All of the makerspaces, or a lot of makerspaces, of course, aren't operating because you just can't have people that close. There may be some where people have maybe 2 or 3 people that can be socially distanced well enough to where it's safe. But by and large, I would imagine libraries and makerspaces, a lot of them aren't open and may not be open for quite some time, depending on how all this goes. So we're already trying to make adjustments and shifts in our thinking in the near term about how Outposts will work. And as a reminder, an Outpost is basically any makerspace of any size, anything from a homeschool network or a homeschooler of one guardian with 1 or 2 students, and they might have a low-tech some equipment to work with. They might have a paper cutter. They might have a 3D printer or some augmented reality with their cell phones that they can use, and you name it. There are lots of varieties of different kinds of maker spaces now. And so as we develop this Outpost idea, at first glance, it might sound like we're just asking for big national maker spaces and city maker spaces to jump in and be a STEAM innovation lab connected makerspace. And there are those that will operate that way, but we are certainly, our bigger audience is probably going to be the people that I just described, like homeschoolers and people in libraries and museums and classrooms in their homes. And we're going to welcome everyone to be an Outpost. And the criteria, we're designing that criteria right now and really kind of putting it through some rigors of thought and ideas and seeing what we think would be a manageable type of Outpost network to create. But one of the main criteria is going to be for people to download any number of our exploration idea profiles, 1 or 10, however many they want, and to try it out, to try that idea out, make some adaptations of their own, and then share those ideas back through our PLN, Professional Learning Network. We're going to be doing actually with a partnership we have with ISTE right now, and they're going to be helping us design a PLN just for the Outpost network and helping us moderate a whole social media type of approach and platform for people to communicate within the network. And it's a tried and tested platform. They're really good at it. And so I'm super excited. We were able to make that happen just in the last 3 months with reworking some of the ways that we work together. But so the criteria would be somebody would come and say, I'd love to be an Outpost. I'd love to be able to be part of this network so that I can share and embrace ideas from a NASA point of view, to kind of add a NASA booster shot to my existing maker activities and ideas. So what we were finding out was that a lot of libraries and schools had, for instance, a 3D printer. And I think I heard somebody in the keynote this morning talking about this. After a while, you know, they get tired of making keychains and trinkets. And then there are some people who look to like various networks to find activities and resources, which are starting to be populated and grow in number now, and to do more with 3D printing than just printing models of things that have already been designed. And so we think that NASA, with our engineering and space and earth science, we have a lot to offer from that point of view. And it goes back to something that, Amanda, you were saying a while ago that really does make sense when we were talking about the difference between having technology and knowing how to teach with the technology. It's very different. It's like I've ridden on several planes, but I don't know how to pilot the plane. It's the kind of same thinking, and I really do appreciate that type of thinking. So what we're thinking about doing is, with these ideas that we put out to the community, that our teachers and educators and experienced people who are more comfortable using technology to teach will embrace the ideas that we're putting out and turn those ideas into multiple artifacts of their own. So we're hoping that people will take like the Wi-Fi lighting idea that we put out there, and they can have students learn how to do coding and electronics and make Wi-Fi enabled lighting work in any type of light sculpture they might design, anything from one light bulb or a strip of lights to a tree that they might create in their classroom out of strip lighting that would light up when there's a solar storm or an earthquake or a hurricane on the earth. I mean, you can connect that kind of idea to any data set. We can even connect to what Sten Odenwald was talking about. Several of the data sets that he's working on, Silent Earth, and even several of the others, even with watersheds and different water sensing that you've been doing, we'd be able to connect into the lighting into a classroom. So a classroom with a little bit of coding and electronics can make a strip of lights on their whiteboard light up anytime, you know, some of this data changes in some significant way. And when you do that, it kind of personalizes the technology experience for the user. They've done something that they embraced the idea that NASA provided, they modified it, turned it into something that not only we could use, but other people in the network could use. So we're hoping this network will be up and running. We're working hard on it now. We're hoping within the next 2 to 3 months, we'll have something ready after some testing with some small groups to make sure it's working. And then we'll pop it out. And finally on the Outpost network, we'll have a big map. So when you enter and submit to be an outpost, your location, depending on what you're allowed to do, and a contact person for that location will appear on a national map so that you can see other STEM Innovation Lab outposts throughout the country and maybe start sharing some like-minded ideas with some like a library and a school in your local area. So that's ultimately what we're hoping will happen.
Troy, there's one follow-up question from Carol. Can an outpost be a single classroom?
Absolutely. So I would imagine that many of our outposts will be that. And it could be a classroom teacher has access either to the school maker space, or they have a few pieces of technology from low end to high end that are in their classroom as part of their existing project-based learning experience, for instance. And anything that is technology related at all that you can use in any way to embrace some of these NASA-based ideas that we'll be pumping out through the network, that's all you need to become an outpost. And you just submit, fulfill a criteria. We might have a brief, small, few questions for you to answer every so often about where you are and what the ideas are and how it's going for you, and that we can kind of monitor and track the progress of the network. But yeah, absolutely. Anything from one teacher and one student all the way to a full-on library makerspace could be an outpost.
Thank you, Charles. I'm looking at the two connections here between you're talking about personalized learning, that thread that goes through. Sten talked about it, how important personalized learning is. So kids pay attention to the data because it's their data. And then you're talking about changing things to be their own when you personalize learning. And then Amanda, the students in your classrooms, if they have something real to work with, they start to realize what they can do in their classroom. I think that's really important. Also, Troy, we're going to have, a part of the outpost, we're going to have a research branch too. So universities, teacher education programs might be interested in participating in that part of it as well.
That's awesome.
So something I've been working on with ISTE on a book project in the last couple of weeks has to do with supporting parents who are now thrust into the position of homeschool teachers. Because my area is math, you see a lot of this, oh, they're not gonna learn the way they do now, they're just gonna learn to carry the one, and all these sorts of things. But I think what you're describing, I wonder if there's opportunities for individual families to function as outposts, because my approach to this is, wow, there's so many opportunities now because I'm working with just my own child, and I can find things that he really enjoys and engages in, instead of the browbeating to do the worksheets or whatever the case might be. So I see the potential maybe for individualized opportunities for these outposts with families right now who are just looking for opportunities to engage their kids, especially in areas they're not confident in.
I really do like that idea. And as we know, who anticipated that this is what will be going on right now, even as of a month ago, right? So, but we really do. It's interesting. The timing is good because since we're in the designing stage of putting this whole network together, we can design it in any way we need to. And this could be one of those, behind every dark cloud is a silver lining. This could actually be something that even after the virus has passed and everything is hopefully back to a new normal, that we will be greatly influenced by how we were connecting to, like you just mentioned, family outposts. That would just be incredible to do. I'll write that down. I'm taking my notes as we go.
It is a really good point, Dan, because a lot of people actually created computers. All these things happened in their garage at home. It wasn't a classroom. It wasn't in a formal environment. It was Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. They all created the things that we use all the time, and it was in their own home.
Okay. Well, one thing I'd like to add with the Silent Earth project is that it's very well suited for individuals, for homeschoolers, for people to go out into their environment and find how loud or how quiet their environment is, and to find the quietest place in their neighborhood or community. And right now is a wonderful time to examine the COVID-19 effect, where in so many states have people not driving around and making noise and being out and about. And I've noticed in Kensington, Maryland, there's been a substantial decrease in this ambient sound level, which I've documented with Silent Earth. And it would be wonderful if I could get more participation by kids and anybody else to contribute before and after measurements like that, because this is a very unique time to be making exactly this kind of a measurement of your urban noise level. So.
Point, Stan. So we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. I'm going to give each of the panelists one final sentence that they want to say.
Who would you like to start? I'll start. Okay. I just wanted to say it's a real opportunity, a pleasure to be here to talk to this audience. This is the right audience for all the work that we're doing to not only learn about what we're saying and doing and trying to get started, but to propagate that out and to work with each other on how to make these things better based on just the unbelievable wealth of knowledge and research base that SITE brings to the table. So I'm just honored to be part of it.
Amanda, do you have a final word?
Yeah, I come from the perspective of teacher education, and so hearing all of the opportunities out here for student engagement, particularly from the sciences, because of math, is just really exciting, and it keeps me moving forward and thinking, how can we take advantage of this as we move forward so that we make these things happen in every classroom. So I really appreciate everyone's contributions and how it gets us all thinking about what we have in common. So thank you to all.
Thank you, Amanda. And Stan?
If you want to grow a technologically sophisticated workforce for, our modern 21st century jobs, at some point you've got to teach people about working with data, how to gather it, how to analyze it, and using higher level thinking to make sense of it. And the fact that you have smartphones that can gather data, to me, is just a resource that I don't understand why it hasn't caught fire in the education community. I don't think it's because of lack of interest, although that might be a problem, like you mentioned, with teachers being averse to technology. But, I'd really like to see this whole concept sort of take off, because it's there, it's simple, it's cheap, and it's ready to go. All we need is, people interested in doing it.
Thank you. I agree. Gerald?
Yes, I'd like to add, if you're interested in more information, there will soon be a special issue of the Journal of Computers and Mathematics and Science Teaching that gives a more full description of several of the activities that you've heard about today. It will be out sometime between now and Christmas. Carol Ng, who is in the audience, and Rhonda and I are the co-editors. And I also wanted to add that you have many resources among you as you've been messaging. Probably Lonnie, who said nothing today, is the most like many of you. And so ping Lonnie Sasser when you get a chance, if you want to know what it's like in other places where the things meet together, where the rubber meets the road. And I'd like to thank Dr. Christian for pulling this all together, and I'll turn it over to you, Rhonda.
Okay, I want to add one more plug. On Thursday at 11:15 Eastern is the Innovator Playground, and the STEAM Innovation Lab will be highlighted there. So please join in that. And I want to thank the panelists. It was awesome, and I learned so much from all of you, and it's such a great way to, I love to tie it all together, how it all fits together and how we can help each other. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.